Hello and welcome to this month's Wealth Navigators Meetup, where we are going to focus on all things sponsors. And we're going to talk about the fatal mistake most investors make when getting ready to invest in a deal. Now, I created the Wealth Navigators Meetup really to pull together like-minded individuals who wanted to think outside of Wall Street. I've had a lot of folks over the years who have reached out and asked how they could get involved investing with me on the deals that I'm doing. And so having this forum and having the opportunities to invest alongside us on deals really benefits everyone. Now, before we get started and diving into all things sponsors, we've got to talk a little bit about disclaimers because what we do adhere to the U.S. Security Exchange Commissions. I do have to remind everybody that the content that we will go through is for educational purposes only, and that I am not a CPA, an attorney, or a tax advisor. So please consult your own professionals when making investment decisions. Additionally, I will not be making any offer to sell or purchase a security. So please do not take any of this as selling and purchasing a security. Now, the first thing that we're going to dive into is defining what a sponsorship team is. The sponsorship team is formally known as general partners, and these are the active investors who handle all the aspects of acquiring, renovating, managing, and selling a property. So they're really, when you think of in traditional single family homes, they're the landlords. They're the individuals who are focused on executing that business plan. And that's really the role that I play as an active investor on the general partner side. We've got a couple different levels of general partners, or different categories, if you will. We have the lead general partners, who are typically the individuals who find the initial deal. They'll start the financing process with the banks or with the lending institutions and put together kind of a wireframe of what that business plan is. And then because we're talking, 100 plus unit apartment complexes, these are largely team sports. So much like sailing a sailing yacht and you have a team sport, the same thing occurs when we're talking apartments and in syndications. And so the lead sponsorship team will partner with other general partners. They'll JV, or they'll do joint ventures with other general partnership teams. And they'll do this so that they can fill different holes in their skill sets or capacity. So co-general partners will also work and contribute towards the financing of an asset, signing on bank debt. They'll work on bringing in additional investors to invest in particular deals, as well as working with the on-site property management team and overall asset management and execution of the business plan. So when we talk about so many players in the general partnership side, you may be asking who really manages the asset, who's really responsible. And again, it goes back to that team sport. We have the asset management, which is the overall oversight of the business and the business plan, as well as the property. And that's where your general partners really play a key role, is in that asset management. They are going to also oversee really the property management company, which is focused on handling the day-to-day on-site operations. They're the ones that are speaking with the residents or prospective residents. They're working with the maintenance staff. They're also involved in some levels of CapEx management. So as we go in and we renovate units in order to bring up to market rent, property management is also involved in that to a certain extent. And sometimes there'll be depending on how large the CapEx is, sometimes there will be an additional team that comes in that is just focused on the CapEx piece of the business. But again, from a general sponsor perspective or the sponsorship standpoint, their goal is to really the overview of the entire asset. So now we got a good understanding of kind of who the sponsorships are, who the sponsorship team is, who the general partners are, and who's managing the asset. Let's dive into what you're really here for, and that's vetting the sponsors. And I'm sure, as you all realize, all investments have risk. And one of the biggest risks in a multifamily deal is, in my opinion, the operator, the person that's in charge in executing the business plan. I mentioned the top fatal mistake that I see or I hear when I'm vetting sponsors or working with investors who have vetted sponsors, and that is really not doing it. Most investors that I speak with are laser focused on the deal itself, and they're not talking as much about what the sponsor's experiences and background, or getting to know, how their values align, and their thoughts on and how they think about risk management. So I always like to, of course, make myself available, but I always like to encourage prospective investors who are going to be meeting with various operators, is to, if you live in the local area, great, go grab coffee. The majority of times that's not something we're able to do, but jump on Zoom. Then you have the ability to see people's mannerisms. You get the additional communication styles, as opposed to what you just hear if you're over the phone. But at the very least, you want to have a few conversations with operators before you invest with them. Now, it surprises me that I've had some investors who have invested with me, and I had never spoken with them before. They were accredited, so I didn't have any U.S. Security and Exchange Commission stuff that I needed to adhere to from a non-accredited sophisticated investor, where I have to have a pre-existing relationship with them. They just went into the investor portal, signed all the documents, and I was reaching out to them going, "Hey, who are you? Let's talk." And that was an exception, not the rule. But I would not encourage that for anybody. I would absolutely encourage you to have multiple conversations with sponsors that you are vetting to invest alongside them in deals. You definitely want to make sure you're doing that and asking questions. And what questions? So I kind of alluded to it previously about understanding background and experience and risk management and so on. And these are like the top 7 questions that I would make sure that I'm asking any potential sponsor that I'm investing in. And keep in mind that there are hundreds of potential questions you could be asking. There's books out there that have lists and lists and lists of questions. As you ask questions, you'll have more questions to ask. The key is that you are vetting the sponsor, just like a sponsor should be vetting you to make sure that you're a right fit to work together and a right fit to even invest in this type of investment, as it's not a right fit for everybody. But you want to ask how long they've been investing in real estate. You want to ask more specifically, how long have they been investing in the type of real estate that you're potentially going to be investing in? I would also be asking to have a better understanding of what projects they've invested in or they've handled, and what does the performance track record look like? One of my favorite questions to be asked, actually, I was asked earlier today when I was on the call with somebody I used to work with at Disney, and so I've known this gentleman for 15 or so years, at least. And we were kind of chatting. It was our first conversation talking about real estate. He had invested in land, kind of his family had invested in land, not kicking off a lot of cash flow, but great from an asset equity perspective. And so we were talking about the deals that I'm doing. And he asked me what my biggest failure was in real estate. That's a really great question to ask a potential sponsor. And what I love about that question, and what I, as a investor, am looking for when I ask a sponsor this question, is not necessarily what the failure is. Like, I want to know what the failure is, but I'm looking more so how they're answering the question. Are they elaborating on what happened? Are they sharing what they learned from it? Are they putting all the blame on somebody else or on exterior factors? I am a huge component of having like ultimate ownership, and as an operator with people who are investing alongside me in deals, my role is to protect their capital. And for me, it is not acceptable if something goes wrong to go back to an investor and be like, sorry, it was out of my control, this happened. My role as an operator is to anticipate those risks and mitigate them as much as I possibly can, and have transparent conversations with my investors. So when you ask a question about, tell me about your biggest risk in real estate, keep your ears open for how they are assessing, how they're looking back at it. Sometimes it's called a post-mortem or an after-action review in the corporate world. What are you pulling away from them as far as how they take ownership of the decisions that they made versus what happened in a particular deal? I also like to understand if if sponsors are investing in each of their deals. There's some sponsors that don't invest in any of their deals. The thought process is that because they are doing all the quote unquote work, they're the active investors, they don't have to invest their own capital in it. I'm a fan of having some capital invested in the particular deal. One, because I am, excuse me, just getting over a cold. One, I am, the whole practice what you preach piece. I am a firm believer in growing wealth through real estate and through this manner. So I'm continuing to grow mine, my family's. But on the other side, it also, by investing in each deal I do, I'm able to illustrate my faith in that deal and trust in the underwriting that's been done in the particular deal. So that's a great question. There's no need to argue with an operator of whether they should or they shouldn't, but I think understanding if they are and why. Great question there. And then how often do you hear from the sponsor after the investment? Typically, like for our team, we do monthly updates, but some investors will want more frequent communications or will want another method of communication beyond just an email. Is it okay that you pick up the phone and you call the sponsor or you email the sponsor? So understanding if that is a norm for the deals that they're doing, and also understanding if the individual you're talking to initially is who you are going to be talking to moving forward. Are they an employee of the sponsor or are they the actual sponsor, the actual general partner? That's a big thing to kind of look at as well, because if they're an employee, you're not going to necessarily be speaking with them potentially in a year or 2 or 3 years from now when you go to sell the asset. You may be speaking to another employee, or you may be speaking to the actual general partner. You can also request that they complete a background check. I'm going to mute for a moment. There is no harm in asking to complete a background check. This is something that I've always been very open to, background credit checks, because ultimately you're investing your hard-earned money in larger sums of it. Minimum investments in these deals are typically between $50,000 and $100,000. You want to make sure the individual that you're investing with is somebody that somebody that doesn't have a record in security and exchange fraud, criminal stuff, that type of thing. So don't hesitate to ask for a background check. And what I would add to that is, and call this me watching too much CNBC American Greed, don't let the sponsor send you a background check. You initiate it through a third-party website. I don't know. I don't have any recommendations of ones, but you should initiate this from some third-party independent site so that there's no fraudulent stuff or anything. Definitely something there to do. Now, what makes a good sponsor? There's a lot of great sponsors out there, a lot of really good sponsors out there. It's really all about knowing how to reduce risk and exposure for investors. Every investment contains risk, and there's curveballs are inevitable in this business, especially in this economic environment. But really, I kind of narrowed it down to these 4 pillars, if you will, of what to look for to make a good sponsor. Sorry if this is painful for you guys to watch over there. It's really the experience. So what's the experience in acquiring and managing larger deals? Systematic growth in the portfolio over time, as opposed to a quick blow up and adding a lot of assets in the last, say, 6 to 12 months. You want to look for very systematic, measured progress and growth over time, as well as underwriting assumptions. Are they conservative in their underwriting assumption? And when I say underwriting assumptions, it's really about, when you talk about rents, that's one example I love to share. In the last, 6 to 18 months, probably 36 months, we've really seen these double-digit rent growths. For experienced operators like ourselves, we have no anticipation that that's going to continue. And we've already seen that it's not. But if we would have underwritten for those double-digit rent growth to continue, that would definitely be a risk in our underwriting. A lot of the deals that we're doing right now, we're underwriting for 0% rent growth in the first year or two, and just looking at bringing rents to market. We're not looking at rent growth beyond that, as well as what are we expecting the business environment to be in when we go to sell versus when we're buying. We typically will look and assume that it's the same or worse business environment or economic environment. And that just gives us an opportunity to overperform if we're wrong. And hopefully we are wrong on something like that. But we're looking for those conservative underwriting measurements in order to protect our capital, your capital, the asset itself. And then finally, I talked earlier about communication. You want an operator who's accessible for communication. I joke and I share with a lot of my investors that the phone number they get for me is the same phone number my mom calls. It's the same phone number that my husband calls. So that is very that is something that I'm very accessible to my investors. And while I might not be able to answer a call right away, if you send me a text or an email, I will get back to you. And I strive to get back to you within 24 hours at the latest. Now, those are the key things when we're talking about looking at a sponsor. If this is something that you want to get more involved in or see how you can get involved with, if it's a right fit for you and your family's financial goals, I've got 3 main ways to stay connected. One is this Wealth Navigators forum. I host this monthly, the 3rd Monday of every month. My next date is July 17th. I will tell you that is tentative. I will actually be on vacation during that time, and I have not yet looked to see where I will be on that particular day. So I may or may not hold it. I may end up skipping July. So keep that in mind, but please do invite a friend if you have anybody else who you think might benefit from learning this information. I will put out the topic to that one as we get closer. I do also have a preferred investor list. So if this is, certainly we'll need to have initial conversations, but if you are interested in learning more and want to be on a preferred investor list, and basically what this is if you're in a position where you're liquid, you want to make a quick move into a deal, we have an initial conversation. And then once we have a deal that's under contract, or excuse me, under a letter of intent, I'll pick up the phone and give you a heads up so you get first look at the particular deal. If it's something you're interested in, don't hesitate to reach out, and be happy to do that. As well as we do currently have a live deal that's about to close. This is Park Valley Apartments in Atlanta, Georgia. If you want to learn more about it, feel free to reach out to me. But really the best way to stay in contact is to join these Wealth Navigator events each month, where I bring together like-minded individuals and talk about really all things apartments. And if you have not already you're welcome to get the Financial Freedom Playbook, your guide to successful apartment investing. You can scan the QR code to get this file. While you do that, there is a quick form that you can fill out, and we can set up some time to talk. As I mentioned, we are highly regulated by the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission. So if we don't have a pre-existing relationship, we do need to make sure we're having those initial conversations and make sure that this type of investment even makes sense for you.